Is yoga the same thing as exercise? Why does so much about the modern day yoga world seem so fancy, with everyone wearing expensive clothes, studios having mirrors and lights? Where's the spirituality in that? How do we know which yoga is truly effective and right for us? These are the questions that I will answer in this video. Hi everyone, welcome to What is Hatha Yoga Part 2. If you haven't watched the first video yet, please give it a watch, link below. In that video, I discuss the definition and etymology of Hatha Yoga and how it relates to classic yoga philosophy and how it relates to modern day physical yoga classes that might be called or labeled or branded as Hatha Yoga and what you can expect from a class like that. Today, I want to go a little bit deeper into the concept of physical yoga and shine some light on some styles and brands of yoga in the world today that we're exposed to. It's important to have an intention for your yoga practice. When you do yoga, what do you want out of it? What are you intending to receive? What is the effect that you're looking for? Yoga provides very real and tangible benefits. Before we dive into some of the more common styles and types of classes and brand names, let's recap what was discussed in the first video relating to the Orthodox schools of yoga philosophy from a classical sense. There are 6 schools of classic yoga, one of which involves physical movements, stretching, and breathing. That is the school of Hatha Yoga. To recap the other schools, Karma Yoga, the yoga of right action, selfless actions, altruism. Bhakti Yoga, the practice of devotion to a deity, worship, religion. Jnana or Jnana Yoga, the yoga of intellect and the mind, of creating, planning, art, architecture, engineering, science. Mantra Yoga, the yoga of chanting Sanskrit words and phrases, either audibly with vocal cords or mentally, usually involving repetition, known as japa. And then we come to Rāja Yoga, also known as royal yoga or kingly yoga. This is the yoga of samadhi, or merging with the object of meditation, and then transcending the object of meditation and the mind altogether. Hatha Yoga and Rāja Yoga are like the bookends to the other schools, and arguably are the most well-known. There is a slight misconception, though, about Rāja Yoga versus Hatha Yoga. In most yoga teacher trainings these days in the modern world, the most common yogic text that is studied is called the Yoga Sutras of Patañjali, which is the main text on Rāja Yoga, the yoga of samadhi, of meditation of the mind, of understanding how the mind works, understanding how to overcome the habitual, natural, sometimes unhealthy or destructive automatic functions of the mind, to transcend suffering. Very little in that text on physical yoga, and yet physical yoga is what most people are interested in when they sign up for a teacher training. That might be a slight miss on the part of the trainings themselves. Now, Rāja Yoga and the Yoga Sutras are extremely important. This is my life study, basically, the study of meditation, learning to transcend our physical transitory nature to achieve this connection or union, which is what the word yoga actually means, this union with the part of us that is beyond all that, the part of us that doesn't have the ability to suffer, the part of us that is calm, always, that silently watches the dramas of the physical body and the needs and wants of the ego. And the more we connect to that part of us, the more we'll be that wise watcher, where when we act, it's surgical, it's intentional, and calm. It's very important to study the Yoga Sutras of Patañjali. However, like I was mentioning, in most modern day yoga trainings, it might be more worthwhile and more appropriate for a 200-hour teacher training to learn to teach physical classes to study one of the texts on physical yoga, of which there are several. The most popular one is called the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. And the most widely used publication on the Hatha Yoga Pradipika is this. This is also in sutra format. Sutra means short thread of wisdom, a short memorizable sentence or phrase that a guru would teach to the disciple orally, verbally, and the disciple would memorize it. The short sutra is an overview, a general statement of the teaching, and then the guru will spend instruction time, days, weeks, months, years, teaching what the sutra means. But the sutra itself doesn't contain the details of how to practice it, of the wisdom behind it. It's just the short phrase generally describing it. That's why the sutras are expounded upon in these large books and texts, because they're explained by the authors. This text, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, was compiled, put together in the 1300s by a yogi in India called Swatmarama. And this book was published by Yoga Publications Trust in Bihar, India, and it was transliterated, translated, and commentated on by Swami Mukti Bodhananda. This is the most famous book available on the ancient texts on Hatha Yoga. There's another one that's popular as well that I've studied also. The book is called Pure Yoga, but the book is a transliteration from Sanskrit, translation to English, and commentary on another ancient text called the Garanda Samhita. It has similar teachings on physical yoga as the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, but not quite as many. These are the texts that might be perhaps more appropriate to study in a teacher training. I would never suggest to not study meditation, though. Meditation and learning the beauty of thought control, in my opinion, is more important than learning the physical practices. However, when you sign up for a 200-hour training, you're interested in teaching physical yoga and some meditation, of course. Now, talking about the texts on Rāja Yoga. Patanjali was the man who compiled the Yoga Sutras, and as discussed in the first video, most scholars believe it happened around 200 BC. It's debatable when Patanjali actually lived and when he compiled his sutras. There are countless books on the sutras. The sutras are 196. They're in Devanagari script. In order to be able to pronounce them, for most English speakers, they need to be transliterated from the Devanagari script into English letters, or Roman characters as we call them. Then those characters need to be translated to English words so we can pronounce them, and then they need to be explained and commented on. And that's why there are so many texts on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. One of my favorites is here. It's called The Secret of the Yoga Sutra by Pandit Rajmani Tigunaya, the head of the Himalayan Institute. And this just happens to be the first of the 4 chapters of the Yoga Sutras. The first of 4 chapters, 51 sutras out of the 196. He's also published the 2nd and 3rd chapter books as well. I don't believe the 4th chapter book is out yet. I hope it comes out soon. This may not be that recognizable to you. If you've taken a 200-hour yoga teacher training, you've probably used this book. This is the most common one that I've seen being used in 200-hour trainings. This is all 196 sutras. Same sutras, by the way, just different amounts of commentary and explanation and such. This book was written, transliterated, translated, and commented on by Sri Swami Sachidananda. This yogi, this teacher, he is the founder of the Integral Yoga School, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Integral Yoga is one of the brands of yoga schools available for us here in the modern world. The reason why this book is usually the one used by teacher trainings is because it's a little bit simpler to understand. Okay. With that being said, we have the texts on physical yoga, Hatha Yoga, and the text teachings on Rāja Yoga. I like to think of it as the yin and yang of yoga, not in the sense of yin postures that are slow and yang yoga, which is vigorous. Yin and yang, 2 sides of the same coin. When considering yoga in a holistic sense, yoga is the practice of connecting us, which is to say our lower nature, our name, our brain, our lives here in the physical world, connecting us, that part of us, to the part of us that is eternal. You can call it your soul, your higher self. That's the union that yoga aims to achieve. Considering that, we need both. That's why I'm saying these are 2 sides of the same coin. We need both. We're not going to get there by just doing amazing physical postures and engaging the bandhas so well and holding postures with perfect drishti and perfect breath. We're not going to achieve liberation from suffering if we don't work on our mind and our emotions and how we deal with challenges in the physical world when we're out dealing in society. That's where this comes in. and vice versa. If we become this master of character development, we move through life in a mindful, Zen-like way, and we help people, and we create mindful businesses, and we do so well for others and ourselves, and achieve a sense of true, complete, lasting peace in life, but we're riddled with disease and unhealthy and can barely move our body, that's not good either. We need both. We need to practice both, physical yoga and mental yoga. We need to do both. That's why I'm passionate about this idea of yin and yang of yoga philosophy, Hatha Yoga and Rāja Yoga. All right, long intro. Let's take a short break and then we'll dive back in. I'm eager to discuss this next thing with you because I think it's cool to shine some light on other potential misconceptions in the modern day yoga world. I'm really passionate about this stuff. I love yoga in all its aspects, and I love sharing it with people, and I love being able to try to explain some of the more challenging concepts in yoga philosophy. Yoga is far more than just exercise. It's deep. It can be life-changing. It can be spirit-changing, soul-changing, world-changing, really. I do believe yoga can be a magic pill. I do, for everything, really. That's why I'm excited to share this next thing to help us understand some of the confusing names of yoga styles or brands, several in particular. And after we discuss these first few that have distinct contradictions in some senses, we'll move into more of the common brand names that you might encounter and what they are and what they entail, where they came from, and who the major proponents are of those styles. The first name or style of yoga that refers to two very different things, but is sometimes used interchangeably, sometimes unknowingly, is Ashtanga. You've probably heard the term. You might have even practiced Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga. What does Ashtanga mean? Like many Sanskrit words, and as we learned that Hatha was as well, it's a compound word. Hatha was a compound word of Ha and Ta. Ashtanga is a compound word consisting of Ashta and Anga. Ashto is the Sanskrit word for the number 8. Ekam, Dve, Trini, Chatvari, Pancha, Shat, Sapta, and Ashta, 8. Anga refers to limbs or component, constituent parts, or legs, or stages, of which there are 8. That's what the word means in a literal sense. Ashtanga means with 8 parts, or with 8 limbs. The context in which you've probably heard the word Ashtanga is in relation to a physical yoga class that is very strong, lots of movements with the breath. Perhaps you know the history of it, created by a yogi named Pattabhi Jois in the 1970s approximately, popularized when he came to America, namely to Encinitas, California, and started teaching Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga. The context that you probably have not heard the word Ashtanga very much, or to a lesser degree, would likely be as it relates to the Yoga Sutras of Patañjali. How does Ashtanga yoga relate to the Yoga Sutras of Patañjali? If you watched the first video, which I hope you did, we briefly touched on this. Also, if you happen to have watched my video on practical yoga philosophy, link below, I discussed this in detail in that video as well. Ashtanga yoga relates to the Yoga Sutras of Patañjali in that Patanjali gives us an 8-limbed path towards samadhi. And samadhi, in a very general sense, is absorption, transcendence, if you will, superconsciousness, perhaps, temporary freedom from suffering, and potentially long-term freedom from suffering, a state of relative bliss until re-emerging back into the physical world. And hopefully we carry most of or all of the bliss with us. In 200 BC, when Patanjali compiled the 196 Yoga Sutras, this 8-limbed path was included, and it still is included. It's in the second chapter of the Yoga Sutras of Patañjali, about midway through the second chapter, specifically Sutra 229. In the second chapter, there are 55 sutras. Over halfway through the second chapter is when Patanjali introduces Ashtanga Yoga also known as the 8-limbed path towards samadhi. 8 stages. And they're not sequential. They're not do one and get really good at that, then do the second one. It's work on all 8. Not to spend too much time diving into the 8, you can watch the practical yoga philosophy video to get that. As a general overview, the first limb and the second limb constitute 10 guidelines for right living, morals and ethics and such, and disciplines. The third limb is physical asana, your posture, your body, relating to Hatha Yoga. Just one of the 8 limbs, asana. And then the fourth limb is pranayama, working with your prana through the breath work, pranayama, learning to restrain, build, direct prana, which is life energy. The fifth limb is what we call the bridge between the external practices and the internal. Pratyahara, this is literally that. It's controlling the senses, our windows, our perception to the outside world, learning to control them so the outside world doesn't control us all the time. Limbs 6, 7, and 8 are all internal or meditative practices. Dharana, which is learning to focus, concentrate. Dhyana, which is the 7th limb. Extended focus, which I like to call contemplation. When you hold an object in your mind and you meditate on it, this is dhyana. Contemplation occurs, insights are received, perspectives change, answers are revealed when you can extend your focus and keep your mind on one focal point, one object of meditation. And then limb 8 is samadhi, which is absorption into the object of meditation and then transcending the object and the act of meditating altogether. Oneness. Ashtanga Yoga. Now, the question that I would probably ask if I were you is, okay, that makes sense, but so why is Ashtanga used to describe this strong physical practice that Pattabhi Jois created? Aha! I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about that. The answer to the question can be found by doing a little bit of research, some of which is reading Pattabhi Jois's book called Yoga Mala, which is available everywhere. This is a book that he wrote himself. It was translated to many different languages. There are 2 forewords in the book. The first foreword is written by his grandson, Sharath, who recently passed away also. The second foreword is written by Eddie Stern, who was one of his students. Eddie Stern still practices and teaches yoga, I believe in New York, but it's no longer just Ashtanga that Eddie Stern teaches. We have a couple clues as to why this system of physical, strong Vinyasa yoga is called Ashtanga. In the world of Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga, there's a quote that is attributed to Pattabhi Jois. It's even on t-shirts and everything. It's, yoga is 99% practice and 1% theory. Now, in the foreword that Sharath writes, he says that, he quotes that. Yoga is 99% practice and 1% theory. It's an idea that Guruji, Pattabhi Jois, repeatedly presented. He meant that we cannot be mechanical in our approach or resort to being only philosophical about yoga. We must engage it practically in our daily life, not just on the yoga mat, which is interesting. Very rarely in an Ashtanga Vinyasa shala class is philosophy discussed. Sometimes it is, but usually when we refer to practice, we refer to doing the sequence, the asanas, the strong practice that you wake up early in the morning to do, usually before 5 a.m. sometimes, especially in Mysore. It's that practice, but we're hearing right here from Sharath, we cannot be mechanical in our approach or resort to being only philosophical about yoga. We must engage it practically in our daily life and gain an understanding of each of the 8 limbs. And that refers to the Yoga Sutras. The intention is to do the physical vinyasa practice, but apply the 8 limbs in your daily life. It says it right here from his grandson. Beyond asanas, there are the observances of yama and niyama, which are the 10 ethical, moral guidelines and disciplines that Patanjali outlines in the Yoga Sutras. Sharath goes on further to say that his grandfather based his teaching, his yoga teaching to all of his thousands of students, on several ancient texts that his teacher, Krishnamacharya, who we'll talk much more about a little bit later, studied and was a scholar of. Now, these texts are, first and foremost, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, several of the Yoga Upanishads, as well as the Yoga Kurunta. Now, the Upanishads are part of the Vedas, which is the exhaustive body of all ancient texts in India. And the Yoga Kurunta, which is a rare text that we're not sure where it actually exists or if it does exist still, but it's a text that was taught to Krishnamacharya and orally taught to Pattabhi Jois. Now, in the foreword by Eddie Stern, we hear Eddie Stern say, Guruji has often spoken about a text called the Yoga Kurunta, an ancient manuscript on Ashtanga Yoga. I'm going to make an educated guess that when we hear Ashtanga Yoga, that is the 8 limbs that Patanjali also taught. Now, Patanjali is not credited with writing the Yoga Sutras, with coming up with them on his own, inventing them. He compiled them into a 196 4-chapter system. But the teachings existed for forever, as far as we know. This other text called the Yoga Kurunta that Krishnamacharya knew and taught to Pattabhi Jois taught Ashtanga Yoga as well, the 8 limbs, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. And that is the basis of the practical lessons on yoga taught to Pattabhi Jois by Krishnamacharya. Again, the intention is to incorporate all 8 limbs in your life. One more reference here from his book. The preface is written by Pattabhi Jois himself. I'll read just a little bit from this so you can hear from his own mind how he explains the relationship between his vinyasa practice and the philosophy behind it. He says, we know from various scriptures and legends that the science of yoga has been in existence in India since time immemorial. So it's been there for as long as anyone knows. There are those who say that the practice of yoga is only a form of physical exercise, with little else to recommend it. According to others, it's useful only to sannyasins or people living an absolute celibate life, and family men should thus abstain from practicing yoga. Some people even have a fear of practicing it altogether. But he goes on to say, if we practice the science of yoga, which is useful to the entire human community, and which yields happiness both here and hereafter, it sounds almost like Jesus, in this life and the hereafter. If we practice it without fail, we will then attain physical, mental, and spiritual happiness, and our minds will flood toward the self with a capital S. And we know from studying yoga philosophy that that refers to the soul or your true nature, not just your transitory physical body that you're currently occupying for this incarnation. It is with this great desire that I have written this book. And then the actual contents of the book, the body starts, and the first 12 pages are all about the yamas and niyamas, funny enough. In the first section on the yamas and niyamas, he says, what then is yoga? It's a way of establishing the mind in the self, with the capital S. The mind, you, your lower nature, establishing you in the self, which really is another way to say union. Yoga is union. And what did we learn earlier? That we unionize, we connect our actual waking consciousness with our true self, our soul. It's nebulous, it's vague. How do you do that? Where is the soul? How do you connect yourself? You do it through practice of meditation, of calming the brain, calming the mind, and realizing that there's a higher intelligence that you have access to. I can't tell you to do it. I can't show you with my finger. I can't point. You have to calm the mind by closing the eyes, getting the mind still. You can do some breathing exercises, get your mind focused, and learn to keep your mind focused on one thing for a long time. And then it's almost magic how there's a dissociation from the physical, a transcendence through samadhi. That's what we're talking about. What then is yoga? It's a way of establishing the mind in the self. This is known as yoga. And then he references Sutra number 1.2 in the Yoga Sutras of Patañjali, second sutra, first chapter, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which is when Patanjali gives us the definition of yoga. Yoga is the calming of the mind. That right there gives us a lot of insight into why Mr. Pattabhi Jois, who taught strong, vinyasa, dynamic, arm balance, laden, sweaty, strength-building, exhaustive yoga, that it's all about getting the mind calm so you can establish yourself in yourself. All right. At face value, it's confusing, right? Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga, Ashtanga 8-limbed yoga, which has nothing to do with the physical practice. That's the first discrepancy that I wanted to shine light on. So that was a long explanation. If I can clarify that more, please put comments below so I can explain it in a better way. There's Ashtanga 8-limbed yoga, from Patanjali, 200 BC. And then there's Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga, the sequence of strong yoga poses, which is taught in thousands of places around the world today, originated by this guy, Pattabhi Jois. Okay, awesome. The next brand or style of yoga that is sometimes misunderstood, misrepresented perhaps, and maybe slightly confusing, Kundalini yoga. Two very different references. Similar to what we learned with Ashtanga, one of the references is an ancient practice taught in ancient texts about activating, enlivening superconsciousness, truly, becoming nearly superhuman. And that's not magic, by the way. It's possible for everyone. It really is. We can all become more conscious. Wouldn't it stand to reason that some people are more conscious than others? Think about someone who's not very conscious, right? Maybe it's somebody who drinks a lot of alcohol, someone who hasn't developed their intelligence very much, and that's not derogatory or negative. Some people have natural mental abilities that others don't. Not everyone could have come up with the equation E equals mc squared like Einstein did. Not everyone can compose symphonies at the age of 8 or 9. Was that Mozart or Beethoven? Or there are many child prodigies throughout history, and other people don't. Wouldn't it make sense that we can work on that and practice things to get smarter, to get more conscious, to get more aware? The yoga scriptures teach us that the technique to do this is called Kundalini yoga. Kundalini is a word that references a coiled, dormant energy, and the yogis, through tradition, tell us that that location is at the base of our spine. Kundalini is present in people that are very smart. Some of the brightest minds that have lived. Think of Isaac Newton, Carl Sagan, Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps Steve Jobs, not sure. Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama. They have some special energy. They have something. And the yoga tradition tells us that Kundalini can be activated intentionally. There are lots of side notes to this. It shouldn't be forced. It can be very dangerous if it's forced. It can also happen naturally. We're all moving in that direction lifetime after lifetime. This concept requires a belief in reincarnation, but practicing yoga does not require a belief in reincarnation. If you don't try, you're going to evolve slowly but surely. Just like Darwin said, evolution happens. Survival of the fittest and natural selection occurs whether we try to or not. Fish didn't try to grow legs and turn into land-walking amphibians. It just happens naturally. The fish that had the ability to use their fins to get up on land and eat different kinds of food and create a safer place to lay their eggs, perhaps, they passed on their genes more, and those stronger fins might have turned into legs, and then they create. That's the process. But the same thing happens with consciousness. We learn and grow each lifetime. We retain the essence of lessons learned in previous lifetimes. We use that and build upon it in each lifetime. It's slow if you don't try to further it. It's faster if you intend to get smarter, to get wiser, to care about the world and humanity. The universe gives back to you. You get more energy back, you get more knowledge and wisdom back, and you can practice becoming more conscious. Think about your sphere of awareness. Sometimes we think that our ability to perceive is just straight ahead. Since we have two eyes that point forward, we just perceive what's in front of us. That's not true. You can hear in 360. You can feel in 360. You know when somebody appears behind you, even if you don't see them or hear them. Sometimes you can tell there's a presence behind you. Is it air pressure? Is it the hairs on your skin? Maybe, but it's also something else. You sense vibration somehow. Wouldn't it make sense that you can heighten that and hone that sense? We have more than 5 senses. We have a 6th and potentially several other senses that relate to expansion of consciousness. What if your ability to perceive just got as big as the city you live in? What if you were able to perceive everything going on? Now, it's not realistic right now to think that you can perceive everything that's going on in your city. You'd be overwhelmed. How many millions of people would you be aware of? Their thoughts, their actions, how many cars, how many computers, how many radio waves and Bluetooth signals? You'd be overwhelmed. We don't want that. But if we do it consciously and mindfully to practice becoming more aware, that's expanding your consciousness. Kundalini energy gives us the ability to do this, usually very slow. but it's real. There are several texts that teach classic Kundalini yoga. And for our intention and purpose in this conversation, we can call Hatha Yoga Kundalini yoga in a way, because everything we do in Hatha Yoga is designed to purify our whole being, to create a vessel which is composed of physical matter, energy, prana, emotions, which is also a form of energy, thoughts, which is also a form of energy. Creating this vessel, which is composite of all these different layers, physical, energetic, emotional, mental, fit for a stronger spiritual consciousness to operate through. This body and this mind and these thoughts and emotions that I use are here for me to use. In other words, I can use them more intentionally, or I can abuse this vehicle and just flop around through life and bounce up against obstacles and get hurt and stuff, or I can intentionally be careful and be controlled and look around and only do things that are healthy and do things that are beneficial and do things that help others, so we can all further our consciousness expansion together, which makes it exponentially faster for everybody. The universe wants us to evolve, and when we help others, we are helped. That's intentional raising of our consciousness, and that makes it happen faster. Otherwise, it's very slow and sometimes painful. Regarding the teachings on it, the basic teachings on Kundalini can be found in any Hatha Yoga practice. Anytime you do breath work, the sun salutation, anytime you sit in stillness and engage your bandhas and create a concentration of energy in your torso and see it with your internal awareness getting brighter and empowering your heart, that's preparing you for Kundalini. Eventually, for all of us, it will be activated. There are some specific texts. Let's grab a couple of them. These two books here, Agora and Agora 2, written by a scholarly yogi named Robert Svoboda. Read those if you care to. I jumped ahead and dove into that before I explained why the word is confusing to many people. So far, we've been discussing things relating to Kundalini Yoga that were probably not known to many of you. What you probably have heard of, though, is the brand name of Kundalini Yoga that's practiced in thousands, tens of thousands of studios across the world today. The brand name Kundalini Yoga, founded by Yogi Bhajan in the 1960s. It was mainly practiced by Yogi Bhajan and the Sikh religion tradition that he was a part of and some of his followers, and it's still practiced today. He created a style of yoga. It's not a set sequence, but the Kundalini brand of class is a set template, a set procedure. There are certain things that you do at the very beginning, and then you move into different things that can be interchanged, and then there's more and then more. It's usually a 90-minute practice, which involves these sections, lots of chanting, lots of breath work, lots of meditation, lots of kriya, some asanas. There's almost always a gong bath towards the end. But the specific practices the teacher can interchange. And so in the 1960s, when Yogi Bhajan came to America, he started teaching this style, and he realized that it was a hit because it was intense enough to get people feeling really good without drugs. And one of the quotes that he would say is, "Come get high without drugs, get high on the breath." It was a very breath-based, pranayama-based yoga practice. You can find Kundalini Yoga, the brand, almost anywhere. Usually you'll see people that look like they're Sikh religious practitioners. They wear white, usually turbans. Sometimes there's a splash of orange. They will sometimes have a Sikh name or a spiritual name that's been given to them. If they did a teacher training with an accredited Kundalini teacher who's part of the 3HO organization, which was the organization that Yogi Bhajan founded, it's still active today. Similar to Pattabhi Jois, how he borrowed a name of an ancient teaching, Yogi Bhajan borrowed the name Kundalini Yoga to brand his style of yoga. I've taken a bunch of the classes. I've been around Kundalini Yoga a lot. They don't talk about raising or activating Kundalini energy that much. They do mention it, but the practice is much more than that to them. It's much more a lifestyle and a way of living than just to activate and conjure and create the conditions for super consciousness to unfold within you. And when this energy is activated, when the conditions are proper and correct and we're prepared for it to be awoken, it rises up through the Sushumna Nadi. Rather, it spirals around it and through it, the sacred central channel, the main tube or line or pathway that prana and eventually Kundalini energy moves through the body, which corresponds to the spinal cord. It's dormant at the root chakra near the tailbone. And when it's active, it rises and pierces each of the 7 major chakras and transforms them. Once it reaches the crown chakra, you are transformed. It's an energy that's so powerful. It's not to be played with. It's not to be conjured prematurely. You might be thinking, how do you know if it's premature? You can ask yourself this question. If you had superpowers, would you use them for the benefit of humanity, or would you use them for more selfish things? And be honest with yourself. Just if you would get a better car, a better house for yourself, if you'd buy some stuff, if you'd use it to somehow get more creature comforts, that's okay. Be honest. It's probably premature. This type of energy the universe gives to us when we are evolved enough to know that our personal desires pale terribly in comparison to using these powers for the betterment of the entire world. If your true intention was to, for example, use Kundalini energy to influence world leaders for world peace or aid in natural disaster situations, like only, you'd probably be a candidate for Kundalini rising sooner than later. In this lifetime, maybe not 15 lifetimes from now. I don't ever want to give a discussion or engage in a talk about Kundalini rising, Kundalini activation without giving a warning. I know people who have tried to force it and the results were terrible, near deadly. I believe that it's true, that this is what happened. If you try to force Kundalini to rise before you're ready, you could do it. It's possible to do a bunch of strenuous breathing techniques for a few months, perhaps at a time, maybe a few years, to do vigorous, jarring, jolting physical movements. You can watch a video on YouTube. I forget the sect of monk that is depicted in this video. These monks are doing this technique where they put their legs in lotus and they somehow lift themselves, jump with either their leg strength or they're using their arms. They jump, legs are in lotus, and they let themselves slam back down onto the ground. They're on cushions or on a soft carpeted surface, but they're slamming their tailbone down with the intention to shake energy loose at the spine, this Kundalini at the base of the spine so it rises. I've also known people who have done intense breathing practices like holding the breath, trying to hold the breath for 6 minutes, for example, over and over again. And that deprives the brain of oxygen. You've heard of stories probably of people getting struck by lightning and going crazy or becoming delirious, delusional, a little bit psychotic perhaps, or psychic maybe. If you study some of these teachings, the veil between the physical world and the astral plane or the lower mental, higher mental plane gets ripped away prematurely, and we're exposed to things that we're not ready to perceive. We're not equipped to participate in those inner planes. Do it the right way. Do it the mindful way. Work on your yamas and niyamas. Make sure your ethics are stellar. Make sure your morals are solid and pointed towards the right direction. Make sure you're a disciplined individual who can do a practice for 40 days and not miss a day. Train yourself. You'll build the willpower and develop the conditions, and this beautiful universe, which is intelligent, will gift you some abilities. The 4th chapter of the Yoga Sutras talks about the abilities that yogis achieve through their practices of character development, of tapas, of doing your sadhana for a long time without fail, with reverence. You're given powers and abilities. And it might be just to see answers to problems more clearly. It might be the ability to provide comfort to people who are stressed or who have trauma. You might be that comfort blanket just by your energy being there. That might be a superpower. You might be able to practice Reiki at such a high level you can heal people with your hands. Those might be your powers. Or maybe you can perceive thoughts and offer help through the mental plane, you can get superpowers through yoga practice, but do it the right way.